There's a few different like questions that we're gonna go through, and one of them,
good ones?
yeah, some good ones, and one of them, I thought this was like a pretty good thing, and I've sort of talked about this shit a little bit over the years, like because me and Danny were both pretty into the idea of like what's the best way to design your life and all that sort of shit, and it says, this person says, they're in their late 20s and they were kind of like, listen, you guys seem to be doing really well and have your life together. And that's one of the things they say. And which is funny because we've always, in art and comedy, there's such a push for people to be like, I'm the tortured artist. I'm such a mess, right?
Yeah.
We know so many people where they just lean into like, I'm a mess. And me and Danny were kind of like, yeah, I mean, I'm not a mess. So I don't know.
I don't know. Totally. They're like, you're not vulnerable. You're like, I'm just trying to figure out my life. I'm not like leaning into just being a fucking.
No. Because even when I was like, when I was in like the early band days, I was a little bit of like a fucking, like I was trouble. I was getting kicked out. But at the same time, I've always even said it was, and maybe this is a rationalization, but I don't think so, because it was rational at the time because like everyone thought it was sick. Mm-hmm. Like the people that followed me thought we were like cool.
Yeah.
And we were fucking, and it was I was making all these videos, fucking getting kicked out of places. We were telling it. Yeah, we were like the wild band. I wanted to be writing about, a rock and roll, crazy rock and roll guy.
It's not like Jackass guys where we're like, what are we doing here?
No, it did.
No, but I'm saying the guys.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Jackass,
exactly. Yeah.
They're not like, what are we doing? They're like, yeah, this is kind of the thing.
Yeah, but so this person, their first question is, what are some mistakes that you made and learned from? And if you think, I can think of like a few. So
just in general?
What are like, and I'll tell you a few like the way that I'm thinking of it. So what are things that in your 20s, because I can think of a few really good ones, that in your 20s, you're like, I fucked that up. And
I know that my number one.
Okay, what's your number one?
Fucking dating a girl in North Bay.
So that's your number one.
That was a fucking disaster.
That was the biggest mistake you made.
Dude, well, not only that, so the main thing was, one, is like she lived 4 hours away. And then, which was so stupid, but I was like, and then the next thing was like, I was kind of just like starting out in comedy, and then I was just like gone all these weekends. I remember being like, what am I doing?
It was fucking your life.
I was like, this is so stupid. But I was like, just a fucking spineless weasel.
You got to nut up and break up with them.
I know. And then I remember I tried and she started crying. I go,
fine. Another few more weekends. How angry were you driving those 12 hours up there?
Oh, it was, I was like,
does that bring you back PTSD?
No, I just was like, fuck, that was so stupid. And then the only thing is like, it wasn't for that long that I was doing it, maybe not even a year, but still like for a year, I was like doing almost a year. I was like going to North Bay, Ontario on the weekends.
What a mess.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I would say probably
gash.
Some big ones, and you can add to these. It's like probably one of the biggest things that I look back at is like, the first one's cliche, but there's other components of it, is not trusting your gut. And so the way to like trust your gut is not about what to do. Trusting your gut is more about when things aren't right. So let's say you get into a deal that doesn't feel right. You know what I mean? Or let's say you're doing something that doesn't feel like the right thing. Like, or even when I was working on stuff and I would be like, even in songs back in the day, and we were making music or making TV or something, and I started working with someone that was, pushing it into a different way and I didn't feel right about it. And then understanding like you have to be able to do those like politics of fucking having those conversations. And I used to be so like afraid of confrontation. And then I read like a lot of like negotiating books. Mm-hmm. Did you ever read any of those negotiating books?
Not really. I've read stuff about them. I've never specifically read.
So I read like 2 or 3 like straight up like how to negotiate, the negotiator's handbook, like stuff like that.
Okay.
And it turns it into a game, because all these things that you're bad at become these things where you actually just treat it like something that you have to do. Like here's a perfect example. Whenever I'm talking to someone that is sort of like sending me weird emails and it's getting weird, I always call them now and I'm like, hey, like, what is your like motivation here? And I'm very like, you know what, maybe like, what do you want out of this? And just even make, like, even at your job, you'd be like, hey, what, am I even talking to the right person? Like, are you the one that can able to make this call? Like very like leveling with people.
Yeah.
And being
kind of
like,
cut the shit.
Yeah. Even if I was, let's say we were working on something and I'm just like, Yeah, you can cut the shit in a really good way.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's probably a little disarming at this point.
it's so disarming if you
So
get good at it.
Well, but also like people are like, I only communicate via email, and they just like get a phone call, and they're like,
that,
because
yeah.
that's the thing too, is like people will, if when it's an email, you can really like choose your words carefully. Like,
Yeah.
you can say something and you'll be like, oh, I don't like that, and edit it, but you're not editing on a phone call, so you kind of do put them on the spot.
Yeah, even like recently it was like working on like a project and you could tell someone had like a problem with it, and in calling it and being like, hey, like, I'm sort of getting that you have a problem. Like, I'm just wondering, like, is that actually the thing, or was there kind of more stuff that you're not really saying? And I'm just trying to get like a read on like where you're at and what you want, and really like putting the ball back into people's court of like, what are you trying to get out of this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And I even feel like with girls, that was we always said that, like me and Paul said, shining the light on them, like the rads. But it really was like when girls start saying like, this and that, and you go, oh, why are you doing this? Why you do that? And you go, what are you up to right now? Like, are you hoping to like push this forward quicker? Like, is that what you're trying to do? And they go, oh, they always retreat.
Yeah.
So trusting your gut when things are wrong, and then like having the how many people are like working where they feel like they should be getting a couple more bucks an hour, and but they're like, they're sort of just like passive aggressive about it. It's like, you can have that conversation with your boss in a way that isn't, you would just be like, hey, like, I'm just wondering, like, what's the situation with trying to figure out, like, do you guys have like a schedule where you generally do the evaluations?
Yeah.
If
And
so,
knowing your
what is
worth.
the max that you can do, and what do you normally do? And then it's like, if you're trying to get $5 an hour extra, and the biggest raise they've ever done is $2 an hour extra, it's like, you're just out of the question. You can find that out with a phone call and treat them like a people, right?
Yeah, for sure. I will say another one is the ability to change your mind on things, like being flexible about stuff, is very underrated. I think
I had one a little like that. So
because that's a big, because the thing is, a lot of people who think they're super smart but aren't are actually like super hard headed and like don't have, they're like so set in their ways. They're like, no, this is what it is, and you're like, they think that changing your mind is actually a weakness. Right, like a lot of people think like, oh, you said, like, it's the
you need to be.
It's the classic political thing too. We go, oh, this guy's a flip flopper.
Yeah,
right. They'll say that as a negative thing. Whenever you ever see like politics, they'll always go, this guy's a flip flopper.
Yeah.
He thought this, and now he thought this. But it's actually like a hallmark of smart people who are like, oh, I was wrong, and this, I got more information, I changed my mind. But then in politics, they'll be like, oh, you changed your mind, like that's like a weakness, when in fact it's the other way around.
Yeah, well, who has all the information about everything?
Exactly. But like, people have essentially, at least in politics, weaponized it. But a lot of people.
So how do you use that in like life and
just, people are super like firm in their beliefs about stuff, or, they'll be like, this, I have to do this. Well, I mean, the main thing will be if you're in something and it's just clearly not working out.
Like a relationship or a job.
Or whatever, or anything, yes. Sunk cost fallacy, where you're essentially like, look, I put in 2 years to this thing, like, I got to keep going. You're like, no, that 2 years is gone regardless of...
It's the chess thing of like, you got to evaluate from where you are now.
It is sunk cost fallacy.
No, but I agree with you. And I had one to add to that it was kind of similar. It was about evaluating that more frequently.
Yeah.
So I remember even early on, like when I was so set on making TV shows, I feel like even when the web was kind of becoming more, and that
the World Wide Web?
Yeah, the World Wide Web was becoming more the path. And I was just so set on that thing. And you should be like evaluating your whole thing more quickly. And, maybe you went to school for a job and this and that, but you're down that path. And you, like you said, you're like, this feels like it's not paying out for me. Like maybe they fucking are against your type of person and this and that. And you go, yeah, evaluating more frequently and not being afraid to like lose costs, because all the skills you learn at the last thing will still come in handy at the new thing.
Absolutely. And just that ability, like, for you to change like that and then go ahead and be like, oh, it's actually like fine. Like, because that's obviously scary too. You're like, oh, I'm just going to like give up on whatever. Like
it is scary.
There is,
but you're not giving up on it.
No.
So evaluating more frequently, and then being able to, fix things when something isn't sitting right, because it'll just get worse and worse and you'll develop. But you can do it in a way that's the skill, because people all go, well, then I have to talk to this guy. It's like, yeah, that's the part you have to get good at. Like, how do you fucking like, get a beer with your boss and find out, like, is there walk away being like, yeah, there's no chance I'm getting promoted? Or you walk away being like, no, there's a path that's real. Like, the answer to those questions. So being able to be like, investigate your own life and find out the answers to questions without actually asking them, without forcing people to say no, right?
For sure.
Probably another huge one for me, efficiency over effective. Focusing on efficiency over effectiveness was like a big thing that I fucked up on when I was younger more. So efficiency would be like, you got so much done today. Effectiveness is like, it mattered.
Yeah.
And I think I was, even before, like, let's say making internet videos, or I think I was too focused on like output and like getting this done and this done. And I needed to step back more and focus on like, okay, what's actually doing the best and moving that and like honing it in and being like, what's working?
Like measuring things just so you can.
Well, if you worked 10 hours and it didn't do anything, then it wasn't effective.
Exactly. But
you're like, I got a lot done.
Like you were productive.
Yeah, you're like, I cleaned my room 10 times. It's like, well, is cleaning your room helping you? And is that being a positive effect on your life? And to what degree?
Yeah. Yeah, that seems kind of in the vein of work smart, not hard, maybe.
It is work smart, not hard. But you want to be efficient.
But maybe both also.
Because you do want to be efficient.
Yeah.
But efficiency only matters when you're effective.
I mean, we know lots of people who, they're constantly like, oh, I'm so busy. And then you're like, what do you...
On what?
On what?
Well, it's the equivalent of, and this is the evaluate thing more frequently. It's the type of person that we know that they're like, I'm writing a movie script, and you're like, why? Like, why would you? For what?
Yeah, exactly. For what? Like and again, at the end of the day, it's like, I just want to do the.
I want to get better at movie. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you go, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's
Like, but if a lot of people, it's like, I want to make this, I want to sell it, and you're like, that's not going to be a possibility. So if you want to make something, it would have to be like a short film.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, I want to do this and I'll sell it. And it's like, well, you're doing that wrong. That would be that would be the least inefficient way you could do that. If your goal was, I want to get better at writing movie scripts, I want to get better at writing, it actually could be effective.
Yeah. And back on
that. So it depends on what your goal is.
On that example too, like a lot of people, I think with someone who might write a movie script is they're like, well, that's what you did, at a point, there was a point like maybe in the 90s where you did go write a movie script. And then you're like, see what happens. But things change. The rules of the game change.
They change so quickly.
And you got to kind of be up to date on what the current rules are. Because some people will think, oh, yeah, I was guilty of this for sure.
That's that sunk cost thing, though, too.
I was guilty of this for sure when I was in Canada with like writing.
And this works for any job.
Yeah, where I was thinking, yeah, you write some scripts and you go blah, blah, blah. And then at some point I go, oh, this just isn't how it is anymore.
You had to switch your brain.
You just don't do this. Yeah.
Yeah, and every job has its version of that.